In this lecture and in next few lectures, let's talk about some new features, some new methods which has been introduced in the newer versions of JavaScript and how we can use them on an array or a string value. And here I'm going to start with the groupBy feature which has been introduced in ES 2024. And using groupBy feature, we can group some of the elements of an array into, let's say, some category. So this group by method, it is not an array method. Instead, it is a static method on this object. So we have briefly talked about this object constructor, which we use to create an object. And on that, this group by is a static method. And we can use this group by method to group the elements of an array into multiple groups, into multiple categories. This group by method, it takes two arguments. The first argument will be an iterable. So iterable can be an array, a map, a set, etc. And the second argument is a callback function. And this function is called for each element in the iterable, and it should return the key by which you want to group the elements together. Let's try to understand group by method with two simple examples. So here we have an array of numbers. Now what we want is, we want to group the elements of this numbers array into two categories. If the number is even, we want to categorize it as even, and if the number is odd, we want to categorize it as odd. Let's see how we can achieve that using group by method. So for that, as we learned, the group by method is a static method on this object constructor. So on the object, we are going to call group by. And to this method, the first argument will be the iterable on which we want to perform group by. In this case, we want to perform group by on the numbers array. So let's pass that. And the second argument will be a callback function. Here, I'm using arrow function syntax. Now this group by method, it is going to execute this callback function for each element of this numbers array. And for each iteration, this callback function is going to receive the current element. Let me call it as num. Now here we need to write a condition using which we want to group the elements of this numbers array. So here I'm going to write the condition as if number, if it is divisible by 2. Okay, so if the number is divisible by 2 and its remainder is 0, in that case I want to group it as even. Otherwise, if it is not divisible by 0, I want to group it as odd. And we simply need to return this. Okay, so return even if the element is an even number, or return odd if the number is not divisible by 2, if it is an odd number. With this, if I save the changes, and also this group by method, it is going to return us an object. Let's go ahead and let's store it in a variable, and let's simply call it as grouped. And now let's go ahead and let's log that variable to see what this variable is storing, what the group by method has returned us. If I save the changes, and let me also open developer console, you will see an object has been logged here. And if I expand that object, you will see in that object we have two properties. The first property is even and the second property is odd. And both the properties are storing an array. So whichever element in this numbers array satisfied this condition, it is part of this even array. And whichever element did not satisfy this condition, it is part of this odd array. So this is how we can use group by method to group the elements of an array based on a given condition. Now let's take another example. Let's say we also want to group the elements of this people's array. So inside this people array, we have some people object. Each people has a name, age, and city. Now let's say we want to group each of these people. We want to categorize each of these peoples by the city name. For that, again, we are going to use group by method. So for that, I'll say object.groupBy. This time I want to perform grouping on this people array. So this is also an iterable. The second argument of group by is a callback function. Let's pass that. So this group by, it is going to loop over each element of this people array, and for each iteration it is going to pass this people object to this callback function. So let me simply call it as P. You can name it anything. So here we simply want to group the elements of the people array using the city name. So here we will simply say P dot city, and let's simply return the value. Okay, so here we are telling that group the elements of this people's array by city based on the city of each person. Again, as we learned, this group by method, it is going to return us, and let's call it as people by city, and let's go ahead and let's log this people by city. If I save the changes, you'll see that an array has been logged. So basically, if you look each element of this people's array, we have city as New York, city as London, and city as Paris. So here we should have three categories: New York, London, and Paris. And for London, we have two people, basically this people object and this people object. For New York also we have two people, the first people object and this third people object. And for Paris we have one people, so this people object. So for the London you will see that we have an array, and in that array we have two people objects. For New York also we have two people object, and for Paris we have one people object. So in this way we are grouping the elements of this people array using the city. Alright, so this is all about group by method. If you have any questions related to this method, then feel free to ask it. This is all from this lecture. Thank you for listening and have a great day.